Hi, I'm Dr. Kevin Milo, and you're listening to the Physician Empowerment Podcast. At Physician Empowerment, we're focused on transforming the lives of Canadian physicians through education and finance, practice transformation, wellness, and leadership. After you've listened to today's episode, I encourage you to visit us at phys-empowerment.ca, that's PHYS, empowerment.ca, to learn more about the many resources we have to help you make that change in your own life, practice, and personal finances. Now on to today's episode. Hi, everyone. We're really glad to have you joining us for another, what we hope is outstanding episode on the Physician Empowerment Podcast. For those of you who follow us, we are finally on Google. That was a bit of a headache, but you can look us up. You can find us on YouTube, and you can also find us on YouTube Music as well, under the podcasts. So very excited to be in that space as well. So this evening, however, or today when we're recording our current episode, I am joined by Jayna Amadasun. And Jayna is the founder of Ember Impact Global. And this is a healthcare consultancy, coaching, and leadership company that Jayna founded to help healthcare professionals navigate their work environments. And today's topic is going to be focusing on essentially how to build a workplace culture that is highly supportive of new recruits to address this huge problem we have in our healthcare system of a revolving door. And Jayna, you have been an outstanding guest on the show. I'm just going to rant about you for a second. An outstanding guest because I think I recorded perhaps the episode that was most heartfelt for me. And that was the one where we talked about essentially compelling new graduates in the province of Quebec to work under what looks like an indentured servitude model.
Yes.
And it was just so great to hit on some of those, difficult topics and to speak so truthfully or so honestly, I guess, from our perspective as healthcare workers. So with that being said, however, why don't you maybe just say a couple of words here and we'll get started on today's topic.
Okay, well, I'm happy again to be here. I think this is a great place for us to be. We do so well having these conversations around healthcare because I think both of us have such a passion for healthcare. We've spent time, we've survived the emergency room, right?
Yeah,
And
that's
so
kind of what it feels like.
and while you're still in the trenches and I'm cheering you on from out here.
I actually went. I finally announced I raged part-timed. I'm moving part-time in the emergency department this year, which I'm very happy about.
Oh wow! Congratulations.
Yeah, it's a wonderful feeling. It's a milestone for me. It's a milestone for me for sure.
Congratulations. But yeah, so it's just being able to talk about the thing that I think we love the most. We love healthcare. We love the profession. We love our patients. We love all things healthcare, but we hate what's happening in healthcare that's really eating away at the fabric of what we know to be a strong healthcare system and practice. And so I just love having those conversations because not only are they important and we have to constantly be reminded about them, but it helps people to recognize they're not in the space by themselves. This is not only happening to you. I promise you, this is happening to millions of physicians around the world. They're experiencing these things, and there has to be a way for us to fix the system. How do we, as healthcare professionals, provide health to our healthcare system that is really ailing right now? And so I love being in this space and love having these conversations.
We absolutely need to. And you sort of, when we were offline, kind of prepping for this recording today, we talked about the things we do in this job. And, you talked about your career in the Caribbean, in healthcare prior to coming to Canada. And on this medical flight evacuation, in the middle of a huge tropical storm. Tell us about that.
So it was, as always, you tend to get that call very late at night. It's almost midnight. You get a call, there's a patient that needs to be transferred. So the island that I lived on didn't have the tertiary one center. And so you have to airlift the more critical cases over to the capital. Now, on a good night, the capital is about 45 minutes by flight, and you're using a smaller plane. And so we were heading over with our patient, the doctor, the surgeon, and myself. We got there, and I think this was a one of those aha moments for me, like something has to change. And so uh, keep in mind, I have a toddler at home who is at home with my mom, and I'm on this flight. It's about 2 in the morning. We get over, we need to transfer this patient. We take the patient to the emergency room, do the handover, get back in transport to head to the airport. They call us back. You have to go back to the hospital. You have to hand over to this particular person. You guys handed over to the wrong person. We went back to the hospital and we kind of did this back and forth for about 2 or 3 times until the surgeon was like, "We're not going back." No, they have to figure that out because we need to go. It's now almost 3, 4 a.m. in the morning. The weather is getting bad. The pilots are calling because our window is closing that we need to go or we'll be grounded. And I remember we got on the flight, the lightning storm was intense in the pitch dark as you're traveling. And of course, you're traveling over water, but it's dark because you're not able to see anything. And just the flashes of lightning and the roar of the thunder. And I sat there while the surgeon was highly upset and cursing the entire time. It just dawned on me the sacrifices that we make as healthcare providers, because who else would be up in the air at this ungodly hour in this storm heading back with a toddler sleeping at home? What happens if I don't make it back? What now happens to my daughter? How do I manage? How will they survive? What will happen? And so it just causes you to stop, to think, and to say, is this really worth it? And that was an experience for me that really caused me to be a little bit more of an advocate within healthcare to ensure that healthcare workers, because I will give this caveat: we were on the flight and we don't have insurance. Employer didn't provide us with insurance coverage, and so you're having these types of scenarios going on, and you're thinking in your mind, is this really real?
Is my
Um,
life a simulation?
and exactly.
Yeah.
And so it really causes you to go into advocating for yourselves and for your colleagues. And that, I think that is where, well, that was one of the catalysts to me really wanting to pursue this area of equity and justice within the healthcare sector, focusing on healthcare providers.
Exactly. Focusing on healthcare providers. We've said it before on the show, and I think it's worth repeating. The market the market of healthcare needs to be directed to frontline workers. What do they need? Not only to show up, but to really be present and happy and thriving in their workplaces. The healthcare system needs to be oriented towards that. That's the only way that patient outcomes are going to genuinely improve, that they're going to meaningfully improve. So let's shift now. And so today's topic is this idea that thriving workplaces have a gravitational pull, and that the workplaces that are not thriving, where burnout is, ubiquitous, everybody's tired, people are leaving, and as they leave, more and more weight falls on the few that remain and accelerates their departure. And this is what leads to essentially hospitals shutting down, healthcare systems shutting down. So let's talk about the current recruiting environment,
Hmm.
because I think we've all opened up, medical magazines, and you look into classifieds, and it is these, elaborate advertisements that clearly cost thousands of dollars to be there. Big, huge advertising budget spent by our healthcare systems. They're hiring costly recruiting firms.
Yeah.
And when they can't hire, they're bringing in temporary workers. And we'll talk about what that means to frontline staff as well. But essentially, what we're looking at is a revolving door of new graduates or new hires who are being brought into work environments in our healthcare system and leaving after a very short period of time.
So what I did, I took some time to look at what it looks like out there. And the Canadian Institute for Health Information, their 2023 report. So nearly 14% of healthcare workers that were brought into the system were internationally educated. And out of that, the nurses had the highest percentage. There were 45% of those international hires were nurses, which was equivalent to about 37,000 nurses in 2023. Family physicians, there were 14,000 family physicians. And then you had other allied healthcare professionals, pharmacists, licensed practical nurses. But the interesting thing was when they talked about this amount of healthcare workers, and it was actually at a total of about 84,000 healthcare workers that were actually internationally trained. What was interesting was the decline for family physicians. And so when they're looking at 2014, 2019 versus 2023, family physicians were going from 40% to 38% to 36%. And so, in light of all of the recruiting, we're still having that decline in the amount of physicians that are actually now working in the space. And even though for nurses there was an increase, but when you look at our family physicians and our physicians within other the emergency settings, you see this decline, which means that there is this mixed match of recruiting versus retention. And so it's you have to ask yourself, why are we continually spending the money to recruit but we're not able to retain?
And let's pause there. And I'll just include my own reflections on this. Is like, this is, I think, grossly underappreciated. You hit on such a good point, Jayna, when it comes to discussing, frontline physicians and other allied health who, like, we're bringing these people in, but then where are they going, right? And you can't just look at the number of how many licensed professionals you have in a given jurisdiction, right? Like, so, provincial governments may tout that they're bringing in X number of new family physicians, but if the existing pool of family physicians are so burnt out that they're retiring early, working minimally, or they're moving into private pay models, they're exiting the public healthcare system. That was the topic we were discussing about, the draconian measures introduced by the Quebec government. And so it's this quiet quitting that people are doing, right? They're not working as many hours as they want to be because they're burnt out. They're retiring earlier. They're staying away or they're leaning back. And this has a huge impact when you consider thousands and thousands of licensed medical professionals who, yes, are in a given jurisdiction, but they may not be working anywhere near the capacity they could be because of some of these system level issues.
And interestingly enough, when we look at the average hours spent at work, so I did my little Google search and I'm like, what is this number? And so you have the average individual works 90,000 hours over the course of their lifespan. And that's their employment lifespan. It's not.
That's
And
a
so
little staggering. That's a little demoralizing.
so if we're looking at just, and this is based on 40-hour week for 52 weeks, maybe between age 20 and 65. But when we look at the hours worked by physicians, now we have to almost double that because we're 60-hour weeks or we're 80-hour weeks. And so you're looking at not 90,000 hours over the course of your life, but 140,000 hours or 187,000 hours. And that's a lot of time. And this does not even include the administrative burden that is being experienced right now. Because you go to work all day and you come home and you eat, you rest for an hour, and you're back doing those patient notes that you saw early in the day. And so those hours are really even more than that. And the average physician used to work well beyond 65. 70, they're still at work. 80, they're still at work. But now what we're seeing is we're seeing a shift where those physicians don't want to work 60-hour weeks and they don't want to work 80-hour weeks and they're not working till 65 because they're like, I'm out because I'm tired.
And so you said this very astutely, Jayna. You said when it comes to recruiting healthcare professionals, it's got to be a human system, right? To come back to the earlier problem of these big advertising budgets, these expensive recruiting firms, all these efforts to recruit people from overseas, on and on and on. But you talk about the actual work environment itself not being conducive to people staying. So what does a human system look like?
We have to be very intentional when we hire someone into a work environment. That work environment is like a subset of our community. And it has its own language, it has its own systems of governance, it has its own, just how we would see our society. This organization
It's got a
has
culture.
it has its own culture and own language. And when someone new comes in, the question now is, are we going to assimilate this person into the system? Or are we going to integrate them into the system? Because assimilation is just, I want you to do what I do. I want you to, and so it you're almost taking off your thinking hat. You're not able to because you're just wanting me to be kind of follow suit. And one of the things that is very prevalent with new hires, anytime you walk into a place, and I love this analogy. If you've seen the Febreze commercials with the big sock in the room, and everybody is like, he's in there, he's fine. He doesn't smell a thing. And somebody else opens the door and they're like, oh my God, the mom is like, in here, it's horrible, and she pulls out the Febreze and she begins to spray. So when you have a new hire coming into your institution, these people have not been indoctrinated. They are fresh. They are clean. They have not smelt the stuff that you have smelled. They have not been contaminated. And so, because of that, they are going to be able to see some things going on that can help you to change the system. But now, when this individual comes in, what now happens? They now say, well, why are you guys doing this like this? There's a better way. But the culture says, this is the way we've always been doing it. Now you're a problem because you're trying to change us and we don't want to be changed. And so I think that onboarding process is a time for not only the new recruit to be able to lend to the environment and give some feedback to the organization, but it's also for them to also learn and grow within the organization. But they need to have the right type of onboarding. They have to be taught the language. They have to become familiar, and you have to give them somebody to help them through that process. And I think if you do that, that will make it much better.
You talked about mentorship, right? Like, what does it cost to set up a mentorship program? I know we had one in our workplace, and I thought it was phenomenal.
Mentorship is really good, but mentorship is difficult in a system that is broken, where there is staff shortages. Who's going to be the one to mentor? Because everybody is doing double duty. And so they're too tired, to talk about mentorship. And so this is where the organization has to really fix. They have to be honest with what's happening and be courageous enough to make the changes that are needed in order for them to have the right type of onboarding process and have that success where persons come into the system and then they say, I love it here and I'm going to stay.
And I think that's very powerful. Like, to go back to that earlier point you made as well, Jayna, about like, this is that brand new hire. That's actually an exchange, right? Because that brand new hire, whether they come from an experienced background or they're a new graduate, they're going to have a perspective.
Absolutely.
They're going to say, I'm happy here, or here's what I'm struggling with, right? I feel overwhelmed, or I need, like, I'm not getting my breaks. It could be as simple as that, right? From let's say a nursing perspective. And it's the onus is on local, on the ground healthcare leadership to really sit down and listen to what that new hire is saying.
Yes.
Like, what's going to fly, right? I mean, even like, newly graduated physicians, they will have spent many years working in different, acute and community care environments. They're going to actually have a strong sense of what should and shouldn't be done.
Yes.
Right. And so you can't
And
just,
you've taught them what should and shouldn't be done. So they would expect that these things would be practiced.
that's the standard of practice. And
Yeah.
so, again, the onus is on leadership to just sit down and listen. And even if you can't fix the issue immediately, at least the person knows you're listening to them and you're taking their concerns seriously and you're trying to make change. Because I think that's one of the causes of burnout. And we've talked about this before on the show, but it's this feeling of being disconnected from one's work environment, that what you say has no impact, that nobody listens, that you're interchangeable, right? So that the process of listening alone costs so little and yet can be so powerful in helping a new recruiter, new hire feel welcome in their work environment.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And when we talk about the work environment, it's not because there is this honeymoon period where everything is looking good. They want to make sure that it looks clean and everything is going smooth. But how do you continue the honeymoon, right? There has to be a process where there's not this drastic drop off the cliff, like, oh, you should know this by now. You should have done this by now. You should be aware of this by now. Like you're 1 month in, that's enough time for you, you know? And it's like you there has to be a way for you to guide people through the process of this new environment that they're in, because people adjust and acclimatize differently and at different times, and so and they require different things in order to do that. And like the work that I've done in my dissertation around epistemic injustice and around having the epistemic resources in order for people to thrive in their environments. And all that means is based on who I am and what, when I come into the environment, you're able to understand, you're able to listen, to hear, and there are some resources in that environment to help me to thrive within the space. And so, and that should be something that each employer should strive for every hire that they have coming into their organization.
Mm-hmm. And then this has, like, as new hires feel supported, word travels. I mean, we live in an era when word travels, good or bad, very quickly, right?
Oh, yes.
So if somebody is feeling highly supported in their work environment, they will be letting friends and colleagues know.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you see it all the time. You would see someone come to the workplace, and then all of a sudden, most of their friends are coming along because they're having this conversation and they're like, wow, you're really doing well in this place. I can do well like that. So I want to be in that same environment. And so people will come over because they're like, wow, this is a great place to be in, because the organization has paid attention to detail. And that's all it is. It's the details that apply to the employees that are coming in, or the hires, the contract workers, the physicians, whoever it is you're bringing into your system. You've paid attention to the detail and you've provided them with the things that they need in order to have to function effectively within their jobs without the burnout.
Yeah. And remembering, like, you know, healthcare workers are not just a line item in a budget. Healthcare workers are not just somebody to fill a shift. We're talking, whether it's a nurse or a doctor, we're talking about somebody that was trained for hundreds of thousands of dollars to get where they're at. They are a highly valued professional in our society, or should be, and need to have workplace environments that reflect that. You know,
Yeah,
I
I agree.
I remember I have an outstanding nursing colleague that I work with, and there was a consultant coming through a hospital that I worked at one point, and I kind of said, you should pay attention to what my nursing colleague here is having to do, because she's turning over rooms as a highly experienced frontline healthcare provider. That shouldn't be falling on them, right? I mean, we should be
Perfect.
playing to our
Yes.
strengths, right? And small things like that matter. Leaving,
Yes.
frontline employees less tired on a given workday matters, right? So it's not just about recruiting in more licensed professionals, but also more support staff. Even if there isn't yet the physician position filled or the nursing position filled, can we bring in other support staff to at least make the burden a little bit lighter for those that are already there?
And that's a really good point. And what I've been looking at is institutions, healthcare organizations, governments are willing to throw this money out there. So Ontario is investing $1.8 billion, 1.8 billion to connect 2 million additional persons to publicly funded family doctors and primary care teams. That's their goal. And they want to bring in up to 100 internationally trained physicians with training in family medicine to work in the rural areas and northern communities. And that's great, right? That's really good. But if you have a broken system, that $1.8 billion that you are investing, if you don't fix the small little details that will cause your physicians to come in and to be really supported in their roles, then it's a waste of money because the money is just again there's this revolving door and the money is like a bucket with holes, right? You're putting it in a bucket with holes and it's just going into the abyss. And you will find yourself in the next 5-10 years and you're still paying for the 1.8 billion, but now you'll find yourself needing more money to still do the same thing that you're talking about doing.
Well, because you're constantly onboarding new staff at great cost.
Well, listen, the numbers are astonishing. So I have this one for you. There's an article in CBC Radio, August 2024, and it talks about the recruiting. This is we're back on the recruiting and what they would spend. So it's $100,000 and a gym membership. This is how the small towns are coaxing doctors into their community. So you get $100,000 bonus, sign-on bonus, and you get some gym membership, or you get $60,000 if you want to take over an existing practice, or $80,000 if you want to set up a new practice. And so the money is there. They're throwing the money out there. But one of the interesting things that was mentioned, and I think we talked about this a number of times, it's that this is, and I'm going to quote the author of this article, and it says many family physicians are prioritizing a healthy work-life balance. And so somebody's getting the message out there, but our healthcare system isn't quite getting the message. So they're considering their career opportunities and their factors like job opportunities for their partners, support for their children, safety and location that take precedence over the money.
Without question. And remembering that like there's a generational shift here. You know, a boomer retiring is going to be replaced by 2 millennials or Zeds. It's how it is.
Want to take up a practice.
And then, you know, having a system that reflects that, right? Yeah. And realizing that that's actually a good thing. We need redundancy. Yeah. When you get on a transoceanic flight and you go across the world, they don't fly that plane with one cabin crew member and one pilot.
Exactly.
The airline industry knows it's not safe. So why are we relying on 3 doctors in a town full of people, right? Yeah. Why are we relying on 2 surgeons to cover a specialized service in an acute care hospital?
I remember when we first came to Canada, there was an area where there was only one OBGYN who had to do everything. He was on call every...
Yeah, like that's not safe.
No, he was on call every day.
Yeah, and so we need a new alignment. So I think we can keep going, and I think we should have you back on the show to talk about this. But when it comes, again, to healthcare recruiting, let's just summarize, you know, I think what you said. And there's one more great point you made offline before we did this recording, which was frontline leadership, healthcare administrators need to be accountable, not just recruitment, not just getting somebody through the door, but keeping them.
keeping them.
retention. So why don't you just talk about that, and then I think we're gonna wrap up here.
I think it's really important. Let's look at it like this. We all see when you have somebody that heads a company, Fortune 500 company, if they're not able to do the things that they said that they were going to do, they're not going to have that job very long. And there has to be, because there's accountability, and they're like, you said you're able to fix this, but somehow there seemed to be a disconnect in healthcare where they're saying that they would fix it. It's not fixed. It's worse off than they said it would be. And so it's almost like we're not getting anywhere in healthcare. And we are dealing with very intelligent individuals. And so, why can't we solve the problem? Why can't administrators find the balance between recruiting and retaining? There is a stopgap that they need to address. What's causing my physicians to leave? And yes, people leave for different reasons, but there was another, I don't think I wrote it down, but there was another quote that talked about the entrance and exit of these healthcare professionals in a system. And so, for instance, if you had 139 that entered, you have 130 that exit. So you're almost at net zero, right? And so that means that you're not doing a really good job of keeping your workers. And I think it's really important for them to look deeper and to really address the issues that are on the ground. Pay attention.
It's got to be the day-to-day work.
Yes, pay
What can we
attention.
do to make this better? If the computers are broken and not functioning, please get them fixed.
Buy new.
Yeah, like
Everybody has to upgrade at some point.
yeah,
Know where to prioritize the monies that are being spent. So, do you have to spend 8.1 billion? That's the budget for Saskatchewan. Do you have to spend 8.1 billion? And when you do, where is that money going? So, is it going to the right places? The places that are going to have the greatest return on investment for the community? And I think that's the question that they need to ask themselves, and that's where they really need to focus their attention. How do we spend this money wisely in order for us to get return on investment and for us to keep our physicians, not by coercing them, not by strong arming them or trapping them
or
into contract?
guilting.
Yes.
That's a big one.
But allowing them to really fall in love with the environment, be happy to come to work every day and do the job that they have trained to do.
Without question. It comes down to creating that human system. And
Yes.
it's an on-the-ground exercise. It involves a lot of listening, which I don't think listening costs a lot of money. You don't need to buy anybody a gym membership or $100,000 just to sit down and listen to them as they're onboarding in their new work environment. And so I think this is such a great topic, because I don't know of any healthcare system now that isn't struggling with this issue. I mean, you hear about the horror stories that come out of the UK. American hospitals are struggling. All around the world, healthcare systems are buckling under this revolving door of people coming in, fulfilling their minimum obligations, and then rapidly moving on to something else.
Yes. Yeah. We have to, I think, not only is retaining the physicians that we have important, but it's important for the community, the younger generation that's coming up, because we don't have the amount of persons that are interested in nursing. interested in medicine, who are going to go through the process, go to school, and do these degrees and come into the workplace. There's not enough of them. And and we have to figure out why, because they're looking, it's their moms, their dads, their aunts, their uncles that are working in the environment that they hear come home and say, this is crazy. I'm like, I
Yeah.
can't do this anymore. And so
Yeah.
they're looking and they're thinking, I'm not going to do that.
No,
I'm going to find something else to do with my life. And so we're not even attracting the next generation of local, homegrown physicians and nurses.
I completely agree. So again, thank you so much for coming on the show, Jayna. This was
Yeah.
outstanding. We always love it when you come in and join us. And yes, so once again, Jayna Amadasun, founder of Ember Impact Global, and just so much wisdom, so much wisdom on these big topics. We can't wait to have you back on the show.
Thank you, Kevin. Love being here, always having these conversations.
Thank you so much for listening to the Physician Empowerment Podcast. If you're ready to take those next steps in transforming your practice, finances, or personal well-being, then come and join us at phys-empowerment.ca, PHYS empowerment.ca, to learn more about how we can help. If today's episode resonated with you, I'd really appreciate it if you would share our podcast with a colleague or friend, and head over to Apple Podcasts to give us a 5-star rating and review. If you've got feedback, questions, or suggestions for future episode topics, we'd love to hear from you. If you want to join us and be interviewed and share some of your story, we'd absolutely love that as well. Please send me an email at kmilo@phys-empowerment.ca. Thank you again for listening. Bye.